What's up guys, Danielle here, neutralsupport.net, and today I get to talk about something I love, and that is wheel building, but more specifically, how to choose a good spoke wrench. Now, this is gonna be shocking, but there are actually more spoke wrenches in the world than just this one. Now hold on, bear with me, don't turn it off. I know we all have these, they're sub $9, they work. We have this one, a red one, a green one, and we're good. But it turns out there are lots of cool things that you could get that do the job a little bit better, a little nicer, and maybe even that you would like a little bit more. Up to you, but we're gonna take a look. This was actually spurred on by a new spoke wrench that somebody just made that is rad. It is very cool, and we're gonna look at it today. So let's go. So if I'm being honest, most mechanics don't pick their spoke wrench at all. They show up at the shop and get one of these. You can find one of these basically with every toolkit. You can find one at every bike shop, and it became ubiquitous as the spoke wrench. If you ask 100 mechanics to draw a spoke wrench, it'll probably look something like this. So how did we get here? Spoke wrenches haven't always looked like this, and obviously they look like a lot of different things. So there are different choices you can make, but I tried to find kind of where we started. So the first spoke wrench that I could find that was available commercially was made by Dudley Tool Company before Downton Abbey.
There comes a time when things are best left to the professionals.
In 1894. It looked kind of like this. So that is more old school wrench or Nipex. Now spokes were bigger, so the tool being a wrench, more like a motorcycle than anything. A lot of tools probably also just looked like this. So spoke wrenches started out as something entirely different, but when did they start to resemble something that we're familiar with? So the second oldest commercially available spoke wrench I could find was Eric's Best, sorry if I said that wrong, from the 50s or 60s. So that is where we started with this sort of Mickey Mouse ear shape that moved on to be part of other things. So we see it still in some spoke wrenches. We see it in Sapim or Junior spoke wrench. So that shape kind of moved to what we consider today a spoke wrench, and we still see it around. So cue this guy in maybe the 1970s when we decided that spoke wrenches would look like this forever and there would never be any changes to them. Between that time, between this Spark tool or maybe even some of the earlier ones and now, there have been literally just hundreds of spoke wrenches made, different shapes, different sizes, most of them dying a complete and utter death when the company that made them closed. One good example of that that's on this table is the Spokey. So the Spokey was an incredibly famous spoke wrench that people really loved, and it got this sort of fame associated with it. So even though the company that made them doesn't exist now, Cyclist still makes them and a couple other brands still make them. So they're still around, just not made by the same people, and that's just because the design had a staying power that people really liked. So it does happen, lightning strikes, people try to keep something alive, but for the most part, when a company disappears, so does the thing that they made. All of the things represented here are currently made, or a version of them is currently made, and they all do something a little bit different. So I wanted to focus on maybe how to pick a spoke wrench that meets your preferences, because really, I mean, you're the one using it, so that's the most important thing. Show you some of the differences, look at the different types, go from there.
Okay then, let's do it. What?
So the biggest thing that you're going to see in spoke wrenches is 3 versus 4-sided. So the main difference is basically the Spark tool is what we consider 3-sided. So it touches the spoke nipple on 3 sides. The P&K Li and almost every other one on this table is a 4-sided, meaning 4 sides of the spoke nipple are contacted when you're turning it. So the benefit of 4-sided versus 3-sided is similar to the benefit between hex and Torx. The more surface area that you have, the less likely you are to strip the spoke nipple or strip the bolt. So with 4-sided, it has a firmer grasp on the spoke nipple and turns without having that risk. 3-sided, however, is typically a lot quicker to use for certain things because it can get on and off of the spoke nipple pretty easy and doesn't have to be put on from the top, which I'm going to show you what that means. So a lot of wheel truing and wheel building is just going to be personal preference. So 3-sided versus 4-sided, they're, in my mind, 2 different applications. So when I'm building a wheel, what I try to do is have each of the spoke nipples drilled down to the end of the threads, and then also just perpendicular with the flat part facing the side of the rim. What that allows me to do is get an even count of the turns I'm doing and put the spoke wrench on quickly. So I can move from one to the other, get a quarter turn, and not have to worry that it's going to take a while because I don't actually have to adjust my position. So that's a benefit of the 3-sided spoke wrench. It's a lot quicker when you're doing something like that, and in my opinion, bringing a wheel up to working tension, 3-sided is the way to go. Now once you are up to the tension, things get a little bit harder to turn, especially on the drive side or the disc side of a wheel. The 4-sided is nice because it doesn't allow you to accidentally round off the top of the spoke nipple. It has a good hold. The thing that makes it a little bit slower for me anyway is that it has to be put on from the top. Also, if you have all of your spoke nipples oriented flat to the rim, you have to turn to the corner like this to get a turn and then measure kind of that way. So I'd have to adjust how I do things to use this 4-sided. Most 4-sideds because they're all this diamond pattern as opposed to being flat to the side of the rim. So you have to put it down on the top and turn. So it just takes a little bit longer. But the benefit is you don't have to worry about losing anything with these because the spoke nipple is held so tightly. Now if we look at something like the Spokey, it was a 4-sided spoke wrench, but also the benefit of this type of spoke wrench was meant to be that it was mostly made out of plastic. So the metal bit was just on the inside so that when you were actually using it, your spoke wrench couldn't contact anything with metal except for the actual spoke nipple. The spoke itself wasn't getting scuffed by anything because this is plastic, and the bottom is also plastic so that as you turn against the rim or you put it on, you're not accidentally hitting anything if you have some nice fancy carbon or something like that. So it's kind of a neat idea, but one of the side effects of that idea was that the metal bit only contacts a certain amount of the spoke nipple. So if we pop that out, you can see the flats are actually longer than the metal part. Most spoke wrenches other than the Spokey focus on the hold being the same size. So if you put this in the Pedros, for example, you see that the actual metal part that's contacting the spoke nipple is the same length as the flat so that you get the most bite possible. So the most important thing with a spoke wrench and basically any wrench is that you have the most contact possible for something when you're tightening it. So I'd say all of the other spoke wrenches minus the Spokey that are represented here take that principle into account so that when you're actually on the spoke, you are fully contacted with the flats and not in danger of making any extra marks. So one other thing to note about this stuff is that these are all made for 3.23 spoke nipples. So if you have a regular brass spoke nipple, these will work. If you have a black coated same exact size brass spoke nipple, it is actually a 3.3. And these will be too tight, and what you'll end up getting is the fit will be so tight that after you pull it out, you'll get these white marks on your brass spoke nipples. And that makes your wheels look really crappy when they're done. So you don't want that. You don't want your customer stuff to look like that. All these companies, like Monolith makes one, Pedros makes them, they make a 3.3. One of the weird things out here is this P&K Lie is actually a 3.25 instead of a 3.23. It works on both, so it just fits, and there's no friction here, so I wouldn't be worried about using this one on black brass spoke nipples, but any of these other ones, you're going to end up with some silver spoke nipples when you're done. So building a wheel isn't the only consideration when choosing spoke wrenches, obviously. You are sometimes just truing a wheel or replacing a spoke on an existing wheel, and sometimes those spokes are bladed. So spoke wrenches typically don't work well, in my experience, with bladed spoke holders, especially companies like Park who give you like this thing to hold the blade. So when you're truing a wheel that has bladed spokes, you want to have the tool to hold the blade as close to the spoke nipple as possible, because if you don't, the longer the gap is, the more likely you are to twist this lower section of the blade, and you definitely don't want that. So ideally, if you have a bladed spoke tool, you're putting it as close to the spoke nipple as possible. That would be there. This tool, made by Park Tool to hold it, kind of nice, 4 different sizes of blade, but it doesn't actually integrate with this tool when put in the appropriate place. So if we look at this, the closest that we can get this is here. That's still pretty far away and leaves a lot of this loosey-goosey room to accidentally twist a spoke. We don't want that. So I end up actually just not using this at all and using the DT Swiss bladed spoke holder. It works with a few more of these pretty well. So if we put this on, even the Park Tool, yeah, so like that would be pretty okay, I think. But this tool actually fits so tight. If you look here, even though it looks like it's a 3-sided, it has these lips, so you still have to engage from the top with this master spoke tool. I don't actually use it very much because of that, but you engage from the top, and that kind of makes it get in the way with the bladed spoke holder too. The DT Swiss, there is a newer version of this with like a investment cast or machined bottom that's a little bit cleaner than this old school one, but they work about the same. They're the same shape, same size. 4-sided, so you drop it down on there, and their bladed spoke holder is meant to fit in the spoke wrench. You'd think DT Swiss bladed spoke wrench, they're made together, this would be the best fit. But there's this new tool on the block, which is kind of what inspired this whole video. And that is the Monolith spoke wrench, which is like the coolest thing I've ever seen, but also the first spoke wrench I've seen like real innovation happen in a long time, maybe since this Pedro's one, which also is pretty cool. It has this hole in the top, which you'll notice once you get it on the tool, the bladed spoke holder actually fits in it. That allows you to actually turn the tool around the bladed spoke holder, which is so rad and works super well. This whole tool just works really well, and they have multiple sizes of this for all the different spoke nipple sizes. So like just the neatest thing. In terms of bladed spokes, I feel like this plus the DT bladed holder is kind of like the winner for best bladed spoke combination for sure. If you can't get around just having 4-sided, Pedro's does a cool thing also where they have 3-sided and 4-sided. So the convenience is that you have both styles. If you just want to use a 3-sided to lace something up and a 4-sided for final tensioning, and you didn't want to have 2 different tools, the Pedros are actually doing this neat thing where you don't have to have 2 different tools. This is kind of a cool update to their old school Pedros spoke wrench that had both as well. So ergonomics is going to be a factor for any tool, and ergonomics is incredibly personal.
I'm gonna need black, 42 long, and nothing touches this body but pure silk.
So I don't try to make a lot of ergonomic claims unless it's very obvious. With the spoke wrenches, I will say, I was one of those mechanics who had one of these on their first workbench at the shop that they worked on, trued hundreds of wheels, built wheels, did all kinds of stuff, and this is what my hand is used to most of the time. This is a very nice spoke wrench that feels good in your hand, but I don't use it very much, so I'm not very good at it. And I think that that illustrates the point of it's what you use that makes the biggest difference. This tool, however, changes kind of every idea of spoke wrenches. So if we look at all of them from the top, there's a pretty obvious difference between all of these and basically every spoke wrench I've ever had and this one, and that is thirds. So instead of having a flat half of a turn, the turn can be made in thirds with segments and is pretty big so that you can grab onto it easily. It's just a very interesting idea. So with this, hypothetically, it would be easier to turn on a spoke because you don't have to maneuver your hands, because building wheels is very intensive on this tendon right here because of the finite movement. And as the tension goes up, that movement gets more damaging on your hands, in my experience, because wheel building was my favorite thing to do, but also was the most taxing thing on my hands. This alleviates a lot of that, which is kind of cool. So if we go over to the wheel, when you're on a spoke, you can actually turn it and have a little bit bigger radius for your hand, as opposed to the traditional radius. of this that has your fingers a lot closer together. So the effective difference of that is essentially this versus this. So if you notice how much closer your fingers have to be to turn this spoke wrench versus the wide opening that you can have, it makes a difference on the wear on your hands, makes it easier to turn, makes it easier to build. Now, Monolith also has an XL version of this that has a quick spinner on the top. Given that I prefer the 3-sided for building, I would almost rather just have one of these, but a 3-sided spoke wrench so that I could spin it. That would be actually pretty rad. So truly the real message is, it's up to you. You can just keep doing what you're doing and use this one, which I guarantee most of you are, or you can try out some of the other options and maybe get something that's a little bit more ergonomic, that doesn't have you making so many mistakes or rounding off so many spokes, and is a little bit more professional, i.e. any of the other choices on this table. It's up to you. But if you want the newest spoke wrench on the market, check out Monolith. They're making some really cool stuff. They have 4 different sizes, the XL version with the driver on the top. And if you look at this, is like investment cast, metal body with a 3D printed ergonomic handle that makes spinning around spokes just like so easy, so nice, worth the investment. So if you want to make big changes in your life and you don't want to just stay the same milquetoast person who uses exactly the same spoke wrench for, I don't know, a decade, try these out.
I don't like change!
So thank you for watching. Hopefully this expands your horizons on spoke wrenches. You don't have to get a different one. You can use the Park Tool one until your fingers fall off, but there are cool ones on the market. Be sure to go check out Monolith Tool. They're doing some really cool things. These spoke wrenches are super neat. They're also working on this ERD measurement caliper that looks super cool. It's gonna measure from end to end and tell you the ERD. That looks neat. I'm keeping an eye on that. So be sure to follow them on Insta. Check out their website for more tools. If you liked this video, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It'll tell you every time I put one out. If you want to support the channel in any way, you can always head over to the website. There's cool swag, hats, aprons, buffs, t-shirts, whatever you want. You can buy it, or you can get a membership over there. There's some neat stuff, so head over. As always, hope you guys have a good day.